Tell us your name, please.
Robert Edward Preston.
You understand you're here to tell us about hazardous tree management, correct?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about your experience and your training in hazardous tree management, management of trees in campgrounds and parks. And let's just start from the beginning, from when you first started doing that type of thing.
Yes, my background is over 30 years with the Boy Scouts of America, which we were involved with camps and their woods and their health and the safety of Boy Scouts and having a good experience safely in the woods. Educated through the National Camping Schools of the Boy Scouts about tree management and the need to have a plan and be aware of safety.
Did your training also include the National Camping Schools, the Ranger section, I guess?
That's right.
Okay.
And I had been fortunate to direct about 12 national camping schools, and we were concerned about welfare, safety, and program and everything that's required.
Okay. And have you worked with the forest management for various states throughout the country?
In the Northeast region, in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania.
Okay. And did you have training in forest management through those state agencies?
In Pennsylvania in particular, because I was more involved with the type of forest that was in the Poconos. Yeah.
Okay. Would that include training regarding hazardous tree management?
Yes, it would.
And hazardous tree management also, dangerous branches or limbs falls under hazardous tree management.
That's correct.
Mr. Preston, you told us that you worked with hazardous tree management programs as part of your duties with the Boy Scouts, and then as part of your duties with the Forest Service in various states. About how long ago did that start? Is this something you just started doing a few years ago, or have you been doing for several decades?
Well, it's been several decades, but I started back in the 80s, yes.
All right. And then you have a consulting business, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what is the name of that business?
The Camp Doctor, Inc.
Okay. And again, this is Ben Sands, so I asked you questions. The plaintiff hired you to testify in this case. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And how much did we pay you as a retainer?
$3,000.
Can you tell the jury what your charges are on an hourly basis?
Yes. It's $200 for discovery, $400 for deposition.
And as far as when you say discovery, you're talking about reviewing the file, discussing with witnesses, discussing with me. That's the discovery charge. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I want to hand you what's been marked for identification as Preston Exhibit F. Is this a list of cases that you have either testified in deposition or at trial since it looks like about 2002?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. One of these cases involved a limb that fell and killed a woman in Maine. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did one of these cases also involve someone being injured by a falling branch in Maryland?
Yes.
Okay. The case in Maine, did you testify for the plaintiff or the defense?
For the plaintiff.
And how about the case in Maryland?
There's a defense.
Okay. If a plaintiff or a defense calls you, you give an honest review of the case and you go forward. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Doesn't matter to you whether it's the plaintiff or the defendant that hires you.
That's correct.
Okay. In fact, I'm looking at your Exhibit F. It looks like you've been involved in a total of 42 cases. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Now, regarding the case involving Ryan McMullen, have you reviewed depositions?
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed the deposition of Mr. McMullen?
Yes.
Have you reviewed the deposition of Mark Benton?
Yes.
Have you reviewed the deposition of Mike Mickelson?
Yes.
Have you reviewed the deposition of Helena Piazza?
Yes.
And the deposition of Mike Conway was recently taken. Have you discussed that with me?
Yes.
Okay. Have you reviewed pictures that have been provided to you?
Yes, sir.
Pictures from around the time of the injury.
Yes, sir.
Have you been able to review in these depositions and these pictures, have you seen everything that you believe you need to see and you need to hear to form opinions in this case as far as what the campground should and should not have done?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's talk about that. A park must provide a safe campsite.
Yes, sir.
A park must protect campgrounds from falling tree branches.
Yes, sir.
A park must inspect trees around campgrounds to prevent dead branches from falling on campers and guests.
Yes, sir.
And those are duties that a campground, in your opinion, that they have.
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to go through some pictures with you that will show the jury, beginning with Exhibit A. Have you seen the picture in Exhibit A before, Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Has that been represented to you that's more likely true than not true, the area where the branch fell?
Yes.
Did you read that in somebody's testimony, in their deposition?
Yes.
Was that Mr. Mark Benton?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your belief that, more likely true than not true, the branch we're talking about fell from that area that's circled?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have an opinion, more likely true than not true, of where that branch actually broke off from? More likely true than not true if you formed
Yes,
a belief?
it's likely true.
Okay. And can you, with this highlighter, just mark the area where you believe that tree branch, more likely true than not true, fell from? I want to show you what's been marked for identification as Exhibit B. Have you seen that picture before, sir?
Yes, sir.
Does that show a damaged tent?
Yes, sir.
What does it show around that tent?
Failed tree limbs that are broken from a tree.
Okay. Do you believe those are dead tree branches?
Yes.
Okay. Have you also read the deposition testimony of Mr. Ryan McMullen?
Yes.
Okay. And did he report that he was in his tent?
Yes.
Did he report that he was laying on his back in his tent?
Yes.
Who was he with? Do you remember?
Yes, his two children. They were side by side.
And did he report that a tree branch landed on his stomach?
Yes.
Do you believe a tree branch fell and landed on his stomach through this tent?
Yes.
Do you believe that branch is a dead tree branch?
Yes.
Okay. Exhibit C. Show it to the jury. Can you describe to us what is depicted in Exhibit C?
Yeah, it is a picture of a dead tree branch.
Okay. And how do you know that's a dead tree branch as opposed to a living tree branch?
Well, there's no bark. It's weathered. It has evidence that it was impacted by water.
Is the tree branch depicted in Exhibit C the type of tree branch that should be removed as part of a hazardous tree program?
Yes.
Exhibit D. Can you describe to us what you see in Exhibit D?
Yeah, these are branches from a sycamore tree.
So my question would be, Mr. Preston, is this a dead tree branch in Exhibit D?
Yes.
Okay. Indicated as almost no bark, correct?
Correct.
Also no leaves.
Right.
And you can also tell from the ends where the break is that it's dead on the inside as well.
Yes.
Okay. Are the branches identified or depicted in Exhibit D, are these the type of branches that need to be removed as part of a hazardous tree program?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as Exhibit E. Same question. Does that show dead tree branches?
Yes.
Are those the type of tree branches that need to be removed?
Yes.
No bark, no leaves.
Correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification as Exhibit F. Again, same questions. The tree branches in that picture, do those appear to be dead tree branches?
Yes, sir.
The type of tree branches that need to be removed as part of a hazardous tree program?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If those were healthy tree branches, what would they look like as opposed to the pictures of C and D?
Well, they would have bark and leaves.
Okay. Are those the main things you would look for when trying to see if there's dangerous tree branches in a tree?
Well, in looking at a tree, in an inspection, you look at the crown of the tree, and there may be evidence that there are failing branches that have no bark, no leaves on them. Okay? And they potentially can fall. As you look at the bloom and the architecture of any tree, you can tell and compare it to another tree whether that tree is failing for whatever reason. Okay? Also, and you can do this by, by sight, by using binoculars to aid you in identifying the fact that the tree is healthy or is failing. What also is part of the problem is that whenever you look at a tree, you do a 360 investigation of suspicious trees that could produce a hazard. And then you look at the branches that are in the tree as you come down the tree, and to see the condition of those particular branches. And then you look at the tree trunk itself to see what's going on, whether it has cracks, whether it has any scars, whether it has any cankers or conks, and things like this that will identify the fact that the tree is failing. And then you look at the root system, and you can, around the base of the root flare, there may be some fungus growing that would indicate that there is a failing root system. And eventually, with a failing root system, why, the tree is going to fall. And trees fall on their own, as well as being helped by nature.
Now, you described to me an overall health of the tree.
Right.
And I appreciate it and I understand it, but there's also things there's things you look for in the overall health of the tree, as you just described. And then there's also things you can look at specifically for particular branches that need to be removed rather than the entire tree.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about branch specific. The primary things you'll be looking for: no bark and no leaves, correct? And you have those in all the pictures that we discuss, exhibits B, C, D, etc., correct?
Correct.
Okay. If you're inspecting a tree, Mr. Preston, and you see a branch of the proportionate size of the branches shown in these exhibits with no bark and no leaves, and appears to dead tree branches, do those tree branches need to be removed?
They need to be pruned.
Okay. And what is the difference between pruning and removing?
Well, pruning is the function of removing.
Gotcha. Okay. So they need to be removed, pruned. Same thing.
Right.
Okay. Now I want to show you Exhibit 121146, which are one of the pictures from August 31st, 2016. You've seen this before, haven't you?
Yes.
And that particular exhibit has a circle around there made by one of the park's representatives about the sycamore tree at issue. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So that picture shows you the overall look of the tree, correct?
Yes.
Okay. First, I want to ask you a branch-specific question about this tree, and then we could talk about the overall health of the tree, okay? First, branch-specific of this tree. Are you able to see dead tree branches in that picture?
Yes.
Okay.
I see one overhanging the campsite area where people would be putting tents. It's very dangerous right now.
So I showed you Exhibit A, which showed the upper part of the tree,
Right.
that Mr. Mickelson or Mr. Benton circled as likely where the tree branch fell from, correct?
Correct.
Okay. With that in mind, and this Exhibit 121146 showing the tree from a distance,
Yes.
do you believe that the tree branches that fell that are depicted in Exhibit C, D, E, and F would not be able to be seen in that tree back on, say, May 15th, 2015?
They would have been there.
Would they have been blocked or unable to be seen because of leaves?
No.
Okay. What do you do to make sure when you're inspecting a tree, particularly a tree over a campground where you know campers are going to be, to inspect a tree? What do you do?
Well, you do it on a regular basis, and you walk around the tree that are in high traffic areas. You might look at the whole group of trees in an area and stand back and view it, and you can start to pick out failing branches. They're going to be at the tips of the crown. You get closer to a tree, you're going to be able to identify, looking straight up, that there are failing branches. It's observation.
Can you tell the jury what type of inspection should be done? And I'm not talking about how periodic, but the actual inspection of a tree directly over a campground where campers are told to go. What type of inspection should someone do who runs a campground to make sure they see all the dead tree branches?
But they do a 360 investigation and inspection.
Okay. So that would include walking around the bottom of the tree and looking up.
Correct.
Okay, walking all the way around, correct?
Yeah.
Also
And-
viewing the tree from a distance?
And viewing a tree from a distance with binoculars.
Okay. Does that appear to be a dead tree branch in the same sycamore tree?
Yes.
Okay. Exhibit 121542, Mr. Preston, does that show dead tree branches that are circled?
Yes.
Are those the type of tree branches that should be removed?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about inspection some more. You've reviewed the depositions of the parks representatives that we talked about before, correct?
Correct.
And what are your criticisms? What is it about their inspections that you think aren't safe? Let's start with frequency.
Well, frequency, they claim that they are keeping their eye out all the time. Well, that's not necessarily an inspection, that's just part of their carrying out work, okay? They're being aware of conditions after storms, and after a storm, you're going to have a higher incidence of limbs falling and litter from limbs and trees, so they're going to identify that. But what's really not happening here, they claim that they make an annual inspection sometime April, May. Now, that's a visual inspection, it's a drive-by, it's walking around, but it's not a 360 inspection of trees. They have no documentation of what a plan and procedure is for them to carry out. They just know, well, it's time to do an inspection. There's no written plan that someone who follows them in the workplace can take up and implement and make sure that the continuance of safety is ensured. And now the best management practices is to have a written statement of policies of protection and procedure and a review of the woods as they are and what happens in their campsites, and that they're looking at their campsites and they're identifying trees, numbering them on a notepad or some type, making a sketch of high trafficked areas to be able to keep a record of what's happening to every tree. because from one year to the next, things happen to trees, and that has to be recorded. And then there's a rating of evaluation of how serious this tree is. Do we take it down today, or do we watch it and see how it grows, and it might cure itself because of conditions in its habitat. But I think that an annual inspection, once the leaves on any tree have leafed out, they're going to be, the tree that's failing is going to have a certain amount of obvious dead branches that have not grown and produced leaves and fruit. And then in the fall, it's best, after leaves have fallen, to go through the same process. And it takes more than one day to do it right, but you have to have a documented record of where you're starting from in each of the campsite areas of what trees look like at that particular inspection, so you have something to compare to, okay? The thing is that an arborist is a more qualified person to come in, and because they have an ability to see higher into a tree to identify additional failing trees. And so there is resource for any person in park management to do a more adequate job.
So they need to have a safe tree management program. They need to at least have annual inspections in that May-June area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And a policy of just tell all your employees to keep an eye out is not a safe policy, in your opinion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. From the depositions you reviewed, do you believe they lacked adequate training?
Correct, because they didn't consult an outside agency like the U.S. Forest Service or National Park Service or an arborist group to help them prepare a plan.
Was there any indication that all these employees, whether it was someone who mows the lawn or who's walking to the front gate to take admission prices, that any of these employees were trained on how to spot hazardous trees or hazardous branches?
No, they had no training.
Other than keep an eye out?
Correct.
Okay. And did you see any coherent safety plan regarding the management of hazardous trees?
No.
Okay. Do you believe that the park knew or should have known about the dead tree branches we looked at in the exhibits B through F before May 16th, 2015?
Yes.
If they knew about them and they weren't able to take them down, should they have blocked off that campground area, or at least the parts of it that posed a danger?
They presumably could have and should have, and they should have warned the clients that there were the potential of failing limbs in the area and to be aware of where they put their tents. And parks do close if there is an inordinate amount of damage to the forest due to a storm or something like that. It's their obligation to make sure the place is safe.
And these things we've talked about, these are things that a campground should do to maintain safety, right?
Yes.
And that's something that a campground using ordinary care should do.
Yes.
I'm going to mark for identification as Exhibit I. United States Department of Agriculture's Tree Hazard Recognition and Reduction in Recreation Sites Plan. Do you have a copy of that, Mr. Preston?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Is that a authoritative and reasonably relied upon by camp managers?
Yes, it is.
Okay. We'll go through and ask you some questions about Exhibit I. Mr. Preston, does this document say that the regulations specify that safeguarding public health and safety and protection of the natural forest resources for public use areas are of prime importance?
That's correct.
Okay. Because people can get injured or killed. Is that right?
That's correct.
It states a program of documented safety inspections on a regular basis is essential in reducing hazards. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Figure 19 from that document, does that talk about high-risk areas versus low-risk areas?
Yes, it does.
On the next page, it talks about high-use areas with concentrations of people, parked vehicles, and permanent structures, highest priority for regular inspection. That would be a high-risk area. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Would you consider the Circle Campground where Mr. McMullen was injured a high-risk area?
I would.
And that it requires regular inspections,
Correct.
as opposed to a pathway out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the park?
Correct.
The Forest Service indicate that trees in these areas must be evaluated individually.
Correct.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Again, it says inspection should be concentrated in high-risk zones. You agree with that, correct?
Yes.
Because people and most structures are concentrated in these areas. Agree with that. This zone includes areas around designated camp or picnic units.
Correct.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. They also go on to discuss that the tools necessary for the systematic inspection include binoculars. I know you agree with that.
Yes.
As well as several other things, a hand axe, handsaw, a borer, diameter tape.
Right.
Do you believe these things are necessary?
Yes.
Okay. Also discusses that it's necessary to have tree hazard evaluation forms. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. They'd say that when inspecting a tree, begin at the base of the tree and work upwards towards the crown, noting all defects. Do you agree with that?
Well, you can start at the top and work down, or you can work up.
Okay. As long as you cover the whole tree.
Yes, as long as you do.
Okay. It discusses, and let me know if you agree with this, that a tree hazard evaluation form is designed to aid the evaluator, the person looking at the tree,
Right.
in several ways. One, aid in deciding the risk rating of each tree. Do you agree with that?
Correct.
Two, to ensure all basic hazard information is gathered. Do you agree with that?
Correct.
Okay. And three, to provide program continuity despite personnel changes. Do you agree with that? That's why it's important?
Yes.
I believe you said that. Okay. And to provide a permanent record and case history for all evaluated sites. Agree
Yes,
that's important.
because
Okay.
the case history on a tree is very important. That is a danger, yes.
Okay.
It's failing.
And it talks about a hazard rating of a tree is determined by three major factors: the species of the tree, potential targets such as campers,
Right.
and defects present.
Right.
Based on these factors, do you believe these branches that we identified in Exhibits B through E should have been removed?
Yes.
They could have been identified.
Yes.
Again, before May 16, 2015. This is part of Exhibit I, but I'm going to go ahead and mark it as Exhibit J, just to get a clear identification of it. But within Exhibit I is a tree hazard evaluation form. Have you seen that before, sir?
Yes.
Is that the type of form, maybe not that exact form, but a form of that type that you believe the defendant should have used?
Yes.
Okay. And in using ordinary care and having a safe procedure for inspections, they should have used a form similar to that?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Preston, I'm going to mark the document you have with you, the U.S. Park Service Hazard Tree Guidelines, as Preston K. Is this a document that's authoritative and reasonably relied upon somebody in campground management? Closure. Okay. On page 1, does it talk about, and I'll show you my copy, that the need for these hazard tree programs are to reasonably protect visitors as invitees to the park?
Correct.
And do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, right under A, inspection.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Preston, do you believe that periodically any trees which stand within falling distance of public use areas and which might pose a hazard to the public or significant property should be systematically inspected for flaws?
Yes.
Do you believe that a documented effort toward achieving that goal will undoubtedly be helpful?
Yes.
Page 4 of 8, under individual trees down under section 2.
Yep.
Do you believe that each tree in the specified area, the high-risk area, should receive a 360-degree visual inspection for flaws?
Yes.
Does this mean close visual inspection, including tests with various tools, is warranted?
Yes.
Okay. That would include such as binoculars.
Right.
Such as binoculars
Yes.
to see higher up in a tree?
Very definitely.
Okay. Do you believe that the use of binoculars, knives, wood chisels, hammers, coring devices, and other tools should be encouraged to enhance the quality of the inspection process?
Yes.
Under 3, documentation from the U.S. Park Service, do you believe that whatever type of inspection is chosen, it is imperative that written documentation of the inspection be kept?
Yes.
I want to go to page 5.
Oh, okay.
Do you believe that trees within areas of landscape zones where visitors are specifically invited to go should be individually inspected?
Yes.
Everything you testified to been more likely true than not true?
True.
Accurate? Correct? Correct?
Yes.
Have all of your opinions been within a reasonable degree of certainty for campground management, hazardous tree program supervision, that type of a thing?
Correct.